Related to the overall discussion of project creative briefs is the importance of details because details matter. Exhibit designers design lots of different kinds of exhibits. Some are historical and have no commercial connection other than the source of the money for funding the exhibits. Others are purely commercial, like doing trade show exhibits for huge manufacturers of farm equipment like John Deere. Generally, these interior exhibits are held in large exhibit halls like McCormick Place here in Chicago. The preponderance of items in the exhibit generally becomes the large equipment itself, with smaller exhibit elements acting as interpretive panels and supportive graphics. But this can also be true of large farm implements displayed held out of doors, as the panel at the extreme left of this image shows. Large outside ag shows, or agricultural shows, call for a lot of what are called bells and whistles in the trade. After all, being outside with no space limitations to contend with allows the exhibit designer to do a lot of things to compete with the huge machinery like this. As a case in point, I want to relate a story of just such an exhibit and how having to pay attention to details is so very important. The example stems from this image, an old Aeromotive farm windmill. An exhibitor decided that in order to gain some attention at a big outdoor ag show that was going to be held in Iowa, that they wanted one of these added to their display space. Very few farms these days rely on these old contraptions, but there was a time when it was the only way to generate power or to pump water up out of the ground in the days before rural electrification. And they wanted something that was going to lure people into their space from a long way off, because up close the machinery is so visually overpowering. They wanted a display of one of these windmills that would be 4 to 5 times normal size, and they asked a designer friend of mine to design one. Here's how it looked in the ag show, towering over the displays. Pretty catchy, eh? Well, here's where the details come in. They asked that the display be functional, that is, rotate in the wind like a normal windmill would. Remember that these blades on the display would be about 6 feet in length or slightly larger than your average human being. Looking at the details of the typical set of these rotary blades, you can see that the blades are connected to a hub via arms, and that there is a secondary ring running through the blades outboard of the hub. Most people would assume that this ring is intended to keep the blades in alignment with one another, and this was exactly the way that my friend designed the larger-than-life version. His drawings for the prototype very clearly indicated this detail. However, designers are sometimes independent of a producer of an exhibit. That is, someone bids to produce the exhibit independent of the designer, and this was the case. Take a close look at what the blades on the windmill in this picture again. You see anything funny? Here is a close-up of how those mechanisms for the windmill should have been designed. Note that there was an inner and an outer ring. The outer ring actually runs through the blades. Here is how the exhibit producer produced the windmill. Unfortunately, I do not have actual photos or any documentation of what transpired because the matter was litigated over a period of many years, but I can tell you what happened. Iowa is a windy place, like Kansas and Nebraska, very flat and very strong wind conditions. Well, the windmill worked. That is, the blades caught the wind and turned the hub, but as the wind grew stronger, problems developed. The blades became loosened on the hub and eventually came off. Spinning at an incredible speed, they flew off in all directions, becoming dangerous projectiles. Fortunately, no one on the ground was injured, but several large tractors were actually impaled, attesting to what could have happened to softer human bodies. Now, the exhibitor sued the producer of the exhibit, who in turn sued my friend. Fortunately for him, he had been very meticulous about keeping documentations of his drawings for the exhibit and was able to prove that it was not his design that failed, it was the fact that the producer of the exhibit had not followed his detailed drawings, going so far as to even omit large set screws at the base of each blade that would have prevented them from coming loose even in the absence of the outer ring. This is why things like details, even in a project design brief, are so terribly important, both professionally and legally. See you in the next video.